Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said last night that Israeli airstrikes had killed two successors to Hezbollah's slain leader as the offensive and retaliation against Hezbollah continues. Jacob Olidort is joining me now on the Scott Sancho, Senior Policy Advisor at the Center for Homeland Security and Immigration for the America First Policy Institute, former advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. Jacob, this is, I think, a wise strategy on the part of Israel to continue the offensive against Hezbollah and Hamas.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you, Scott. Thanks so much for having me on. Look, Israel has had clear and consistent objectives the last year. In Gaza, getting rid of Hamas entirely and freeing all 250 of its hostages. 101 remain in Hamas custody, including 4 Americans out there. And then in the north, pushing back Hezbollah fighters and precision munitions that have prevented 80,000 residents in Israel's north from returning to their homes for fear of a second October 7th. I want to remind your listeners, too, there are reports that about 43 Americans were killed on October 7th. That deadly attack on Jews, the worst since the Holocaust and the most profound challenge to Israel's security in its existence. But I think you're right. I mean, the wisdom is exactly on point in the north. Israel is doing what the U.S. refuses to do. There is no question in my mind that the threat has unmistakably exacerbated due to this administration's policies and rhetoric, which have been unprecedented.
So when Hassan Nasrallah was taken out, I don't believe anybody expected Hezbollah to just stand down. They were going to retaliate. But how many heads of the snake can the IDF take out before Hezbollah has to step back a little bit?
Well, I think it's already coming to fruition. I mean, you're seeing, the heads of Hezbollah don't last past a cabbage head. I mean, and certainly that is a blow to the group's morale. You've seen them cut off communication and, dismember and incapacitate thousands of fighters in those few weeks ago. So, I think Israel's approach is exactly the only approach that Hezbollah will respond to. But I mean, this administration, by contrast, is restraining Israel, telling it they're only acceptable targets to respond to Iran. And, I think we just need to let Israel do what it needs to do to defend its people. And that should be the policy of this administration.
This administration, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, have both called for a ceasefire for quite a while now in Gaza against Hamas. Now Hezbollah seems to be calling for a ceasefire as well, showing perhaps that they're on their back foot. Do you expect the Biden-Harris administration to also call for a ceasefire there, despite the fact that Hezbollah just within the last 24 hours has launched 100 rockets from Lebanon into Israel?
Yeah, I mean, Israel needs to maintain the pressure. Look, this administration has got it all backwards. They believe that they can pressure Israel to accepting a ceasefire on Hezbollah or Hamas's terms while withholding arms from Israel. And you've seen France step up and withhold arms as well. You've seen Kamala Harris take to the interviews and, basically acknowledge that she'd be open to an arms embargo. They should be doing the opposite. They should be empowering Israel with whatever we've got, just like Richard Nixon did 50 years ago. Whatever that flies, and not tying their hands. And only that's the only kind of ceasefire. That's the only kind of peace in either Gaza or the north that will actually be an enduring peace for Israel and for its neighbors.
Israel's Iron Dome seems to be successful so far in thwarting many, if not all, of the missiles in some of these individual attacks. But that Iron Dome has to be, I would assume, running low on supplies at some point. Will the U.S. step up and make sure that our greatest ally in the Middle East has all of the military resources that they need to be able to defend themselves?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I think there's a lot of questions, on people's minds with this administration. But look, Israel has said all along it does not need anyone to fight its wars for it. It is fighting on its own. What it does need is the right rhetoric and the right actions and support from the United States. And that comes in the form of, the investments, really, in assistance to Israel, which actually pay dividends to us and to our allies in Europe. Look, you've had NATO members purchase Iron Dome and missile defense infrastructure over the last few years, and the U.S. Marines as well. So this is not just kind of a wholesale, just, giving them assistance. This is necessary military aid that actually not only helps Israel defend its people, but really helps deter against our common adversaries and helps our own troops ultimately as part of that.
I want to talk about the common adversaries. We're talking with Jacob Olidort, Senior Policy Advisor, Center for Homeland Security and Immigration at the America First Policy Institute. Those common enemies are Iran, which is the big supporter of Hezbollah, of Hamas, of the Houthis, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, the ISIS organization. At some point, Israel or the United States needs to step up and apply serious pressure on Iran, whether that be through economic sanctions, which the Biden-Harris administration lifted, or through military action to prevent Iran from obtaining the nuclear capabilities that they're weeks away from developing.
Absolutely. I mean, you put the point straight on. I mean, look, Israel is fighting a seven-front war against Iran and its proxies all around the region. And this is the same Iran, by the way, that launched through its proxies 160 attacks against U.S. troops since October 7th. Many of them are still suffering injuries from those attacks. 3 troops were killed in January. The U.S. still refuses to acknowledge the use of force to compel Iran or its proxies. Right now, they're telegraphing that they don't want Israel to target these facilities or those facilities. Israel should be able to strike to send a message how it sees fit to contain Iran and to ultimately make it back down. So I think you're absolutely right. And this will go on until we can send a common message together under the right leadership that, look, Israel has America's unwavering support. We will not rebuke it. We will not withhold arms. We will stand by it, whatever it takes to protect its people.
So a year later, a year past October 7th, yesterday was the anniversary. I mean, many people are saying we're close to a boiling point in the Middle East. I think we're there. I think the water is boiling. Where do you see the Middle East moving in the next couple of months? And things obviously could change under different U.S. leadership after November.
No, I think you're right. We're absolutely there at that boiling point. Look, what Israel is doing and has been doing really since it, struck there in Iran in April, it is now changing the strategic landscape of the Middle East. It is making sure that if it's going to fight, that the fight will happen on Israel's terms, not on Iran's terms. And that ultimately is a benefit to the United States. And ultimately, if Israel takes out Hezbollah infrastructure, which, I don't see them surviving past Halloween, they've removed a significant buffer for Iran. So Iran is really on the back foot here, as you said. Obviously, Iran can strike more. It's threatened to strike again, but it's now actually over to Israel to respond to Iran's attack last week at a time and place of its choosing, in a manner of its choosing. And I think that'll certainly further shape the strategic landscape there in the region.
And I think you call me a hawk, but I think that Israel needs to strike at their nuclear capabilities in Iran, because if Iran does develop and produce a nuclear weapon, it forever changes the dynamics in the Middle East.
Well, I don't want to get ahead of things, but I think, you're in the right direction. Israel has telegraphed that it will, it has in its target line of vision critical sites. I think that leadership personnel shouldn't be off the table as well. But again, ultimately, how and when and whether it's as one package or, spread out, or whether it's in the region as well, all of that remains to be seen. And I think certainly is a result of a lot of planning and thought with that next steps.
Find out more, AmericaFirstPolicy.com, and follow Jacob on Twitter, J. Olidort. Jacob, it's great to have you on the show for the first time. You're welcome back on anytime.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you. Thank you, Scott.